The WoW YouTuber Madseason has 500,000 subs on YouTube and just released a video relating to playing old school for the first time. So we're going to check it out.
I think it's about time to be responsible and take a break from that addiction and replace it with another. For the very first time, I'm going to be playing Runescape. Those of you familiar with the channel, you know that I'm a depressed classic Andy. Aside from desperately trying to recapture a time of my life when it was much better,
I mean, we do that with Runescape.
Charm to the classic MMO style that's always appealed to me. For the first time, I'm going to play old school RuneScape and share my impressions on it as a lifelong World of Warcraft.
It's funny, so like old school is actually more popular now than it's ever been. So I think we're starting to see this trend, and World of Warcraft is also less popular than it's ever been, but it's still much bigger. So a player like this is probably still going to play WoW pretty much their whole life.
Addict. The first thing I want to say though is that this video is sponsored, but it's done under the understanding that I can say whatever the F I want, even criticisms.
Yeah. Okay, so this video is actually sponsored by Jagex. So this is definitely a marketing play that we've seen Old School do in the past. They had players like Asmongold check out Old School and other players. It's kind of a win-win for both sides of the party. This video would it have been made without the sponsorship? Good chance, probably not, but he's still going to give his honest opinions, I'm sure.
When I say I've never played it before, not only have I never played it, I've never even watched videos on it.
So he's going to be doing no guides, ideally, which is going to be fairly difficult. The wiki is such an important resource. It's even embedded in the game where you can click the wiki button at the top right. But we'll see how he does or how long that lasts. It might make the experience much more difficult to stick around in, though. There's
no class selection, which may seem foreign, but as far as I know, this was more common during the pre-WoW era. Yeah, that's right. It was so popular that it splits the entire genre into before and after. Interesting to note, though, that there are no alts. It's just one account, one character. In fact, there isn't even a permanent realm selection, and players are free to switch about, kind of like
switching worlds. I love. I mean, I remember because this was my first experience being able to switch worlds. When I tried something like WoW for the first time, or Guild Wars, I think it was WoW first, I was shocked by that personally, because I need to make sure I was playing on the same world as my friends, and I don't know, I didn't expect it. I prefer this system, but I wonder what the trade-offs are between the two.
So you learn how to cook, how to mine, smelt, craft, melee combat, ranged combat, magics, all pretty straightforward. Melee combat has some stuff going on with stances, which gives you different XP depending on which one you pick. You have offensive styles, defensive styles, and considering I'm a Zug, I'm mainly interested in increasing that damage, so I'm just going to hang out in the plus sword icon so my damage increases.
Oh no.
Right? Yeah, in the skill system, you're taught how to use all of the features expected.
So I think he's going to level up attack and now realize it's not going to give him damage. I think even when I was young, I figured that strength gave you strength, but yeah, a little bit of foreshadowing there.
So those are the major updates, but from what I'm to understand, it does also get updated weekly. Some of them can be as minor as balance updates and as major as entire new continents or systems.
Yeah, so Old School gets updated weekly most of the time. There's very few exceptions to that. One thing that is a huge exception, though, is Leagues. Leagues is 2 months long, and historically, they haven't updated the game during that period to like maintain the integrity of Leagues. This is probably something I want to talk about in the future that I hope they change their mind about, because going 2 months without updates if you don't play Leagues the whole time is feels kind of bad.
One of which is Iron Man mode, where if you talk to this NPC just outside, you can enable permanent character death. That's all well and good, but probably not a good idea for my first character, so I'm gonna save that for another time.
So he called it permanent character death, which I guess is more hardcore, that he's assuming Iron Man is character death. I believe in World of Warcraft, Iron Man refers to that, but it refers to something very different in Old School, which is just more or less about limiting your ability to trade other players and interact with the Grand Exchange.
And with that, you depart Tutorial Island, and you're off into the great beyond. You're given a little direction in the form of adventure paths where...
Okay, this is good. So this is something that was released, I think, 3 or 4 years ago that helps newer players kind of get through the early game a little bit better.
By leveling up some core skills, you're given items and gold and gear to start you off until you get...
Yeah, and it even gives you rewards. This is such a good system they've added. I want to see if he interacts with it.
A good footing on the game. I'm given a set of iron armaments, and I'm off to find my first quest. Opening the map, I find just how huge the world is. The starting town here is called Lumbridge, which, when fully zoomed out, is a pale blue dot within the world of Gielinor, which is the medieval realm that RuneScape is based around. And wow, this is a big game with a lot going on. Looks like my map has...
And he's missing a continent on the left there as well.
Once he arrives, he digs a hole and buries.
So this is a fairly slow-paced video. I'm 11 minutes in and he's just doing some Lumbridge stuff. It makes me feel by the end of this video he might only complete a couple quests, which might be the indication that he played for a few hours, but let's see where it goes from here.
This is pretty intense for a first quest. I mean, it's not necessarily complicated or anything, but it's just such a stark contrast to how babied gamers are these days. You know.
Yeah, so he's coming from quests that are essentially usually a kill and fetch type quests in modern MMOs. Where obviously RuneScape's quest system, every quest is essentially different in its own unique story, which is a huge benefit for old school. But it does kind of make the quests and the barriers sometimes a little bit more difficult to get into.
Games that are advertised as grand adventures lead you around step by step with yellow paint, deathly afraid of players getting lost and having to use their brain to figure stuff out.
So he's saying that it's essentially kind of players are babied nowadays, and yeah, this is a good thing of RuneScape, but people just download the Quest Helper plugin. So you do kind of get babied, but the quests are fairly complex in this game, so the Quest Helper plugin is actually a really big help for that, because usually you have to use the wiki or a video anyways.
And as it happens to turn out, I can't figure this quest out. I followed the orb to this building surrounded by these dudes who are angry at the world because they're bald. And what the F? I can't fight them. I could fight everything else. Why can't I fight these guys? I try running past them.
So that's a setting in game related to if you can left click something with a greater combat level. Very strange that that's actually turned off by default. I think that should be turned on. Like, you should be able to attack anything. He hasn't figured out that right clicking changes that. He hasn't figured out the settings that change that, which, yeah, it really shouldn't be like that. I'm curious as to what the reasoning is behind that.
I'm just gonna kill some goblins for now. I did this for a while, in fact, to see if maybe I could level up more to fight the baldies. So I start leveling up my attack, which should result in me doing more damage.
Right?
Right?
Yeah. Hey,
I leveled up my attack.
Okay, so he's got 270 experience in attack right now. A large chunk of the video, he's saying, I went back and killed more goblins, That amount of XP is like, what, 10 minutes of getting goblins? Maybe even less than that. So yeah, very slow pace so far. We're halfway done the video.
I slay more goblins until I reach level 5, at which point I return to my adventure path NPC for my reward, which is a steel longsword. Okay, weapon upgrade. Now I'll definitely deal.
Oh no.
1 damage. I level up my attack again, continue to deal 1 damage. I do this all the way until level 20, where I complete.
Whoa, okay, now we got a big gap here. He's level 20 attack. Which is a good amount of time for just going for goblins and no quests.
My last adventure path quest for attack, and I get this amazing mithril sword crafted from the heart of a volcano held within the lands of, and I'm still dealing 1 damage. Cool.
Oh no.
Whatever, I'm chilling.
So yeah, he's been following the adventure path, which has told him to level attack, and he got his mithril sword now that he's level 20, which is great. But the adventure path hasn't really told him about strength at all yet. So maybe that's something that Jagex can look into, right? Like, make it so that players understand what the value of each one is, and maybe have it so they're gaining like 5 levels at a time, and then say, okay, now work on strength, right? Rather than doing this, which is definitely slowing down his progress. And he probably doesn't feel like he's progressing. Every weapon is just hitting 1s right now, even a mithril sword.
Dances again, so now I'm getting strength levels, and oh my god. I'm dealing 2 damage. Oh my god, I'm dealing 2 damage. Before you make fun of me, let's just get this straight for a moment. Upgrading a skill called attack level and equipping higher level weapons in a role-playing game doesn't increase your damage. I don't know, maybe they said this in the tutorial. I'm a warrior main. Reading isn't really my strong suit.
And he's almost treating it as a class system, right? Where it's like, I'm going to do the warrior stuff and focus exclusively on attack. Sort of unfortunate, so they should address this type of thing.
Speaking of which, I've realized I've been grinding here for about 5 hours, and I just now realized that there's a quest right next to me. There's this couple who barely escaped an island with their lives. Apparently there's a murderer running afoot, and they're asking me to rescue their friend. In the room right next door, there's a painting of a valley, and upon using the knife, we get the red key, which grants us access to a room with a broken wall and a barrel of gunpowder.
I'm impressed so far. So he's doing murder mystery, and he's doing it without a guide, and he's figuring out how the quest works. This quest is actually really good, I think, for learning a little bit more about quests in RuneScape, the types of puzzles you run into. Using items on things is very important, like you use the knife on the painting portrait. Stuff like that's going to be really, really good. That's going to make you, the more quests you do, the more you get familiar, the more that even when a new quest comes out, you start to understand the natural flow of how to do these quests.
And that's it. As a reward, you get a quest point, XP, some gems, and this was awesome. As far as the standards are for MMOs, even today, this was one of the coolest quests I've ever done. Like I said, I didn't look anything up, so I was feeling rather proud of myself for my accomplishment of elementary puzzle solving. But that, along with the cutscenes, it was presented very well, and this would be a theme for the rest of my gameplay, I would find. I exorcised a ghost, I slayed a vampire, I saved a guy from being turned into a chicken, and I found a magic sword and slayed a demon.
Nice,
Some
so now he's
quests were
scaling.
Some took hours to figure out, and others stumped me completely. Like this one where I'm supposed to find this cat.
And he clearly doesn't know that if you go to the quest log, there's also more information there to tell you what to do. That's not something that has been super well known when you're first playing this game. The fact that that quest log is actually really, really helpful. Making that more forward during quests might be a good idea, potentially.
You know, Jimmy made a video a while back saying how RuneScape doesn't need nostalgia, and that it stands on its own 2 feet. And I know that I've only really scratched the surface here, but I gotta say that I agree. The world is huge. The little quests I've done are some of the most interesting and fun that I've played in MMOs, even by today's standards. As it turns out.
So he likes the quest. So far, so good. And he was doing a Varlamore quest there, too, which is so interesting because it starts in Varrock. And it's just crazy that 20 years later, all of a sudden, there's always these new paths you can do. He might end up in Varlamore, like out of nowhere, doing a completely different thing very early game than someone would have done even a couple years ago or 10 years ago.
I feel like the traveling at times can get really laborious. You see, You have something of a stamina meter right here.
Yeah, so traveling, he's saying, is a bit of a downside early on, which heavily agree. In late game or even mid game, it starts not being a problem at all. They want to rework stamina to make it a little bit better early and getting your levels early. So that should be something they work on definitely soon for the new player experience.
In the top right, which depletes when you run.
It's
and
so
when it's out,
quick.
You walk very slowly.
I think if they were to maybe another 20 to 30% more generous with kind of your run energy early game, that would really help the early game experience.
I'm sure there are ways to improve it. I know that you can teleport if you level up magic, or maybe if you run naked or something, it drains slower, or maybe there's an item or a potion that you can get or craft. But
he's very knowledgeable as an MMO player. He identified every single way to make your run energy better.
The game also has bonds, which are the equivalent of the WoW token.
Yep.
You buy them with gold and use them to gain membership time, or you can buy them with real money and then sell them for gold in the auction house. So there is a paid element here. Those of you who've watched, I don't know, one video on my channel probably know I don't care for stuff like this. Told you so, by the way. I think it kind of defeats the purpose of an RPG if you're able to buy progression. It sort of feels like the most efficient way to progress is with your wallet instead of your time.
This is true, and it's true for RuneScape as much as it's true for World of Warcraft. It's not as much part of the culture in RuneScape, I don't think, buying tokens and then buying gear. It's a little less popular. People do it, definitely. But it's not as ingrained into the culture, I think, of this game as much.
Classic, it's really bad because combined with GDKPs and arena carries, you can literally buy the best gear in the game with your credit card. It's like, are there even raids in RuneScape? Do they have the best gear? Are there GDKP runs? Is the PvP competitive?
Yes,
I don't know.
yes,
I just
yes.
can't imagine watching a RuneScape PvP video and being like, Oh my god, bro. Did you see how he switched from lunge to slash?
So this is like the most misunderstood part of RuneScape, is that the PvP is not really like competitive at all. Obviously it definitely is. There's a lot. I've been doing more of it in LMS too and been getting better at it. There's a lot that goes into it with switches, prayer switches, timing your attacks, special attacks. Like there's so much, but it's so hard to see that. I agree. I don't think there's too much of a solution to this other than having tournaments and whatnot with really, really great like commentary explaining for new players what the players are doing and why it's so effective.
All in all, it's a fun game. I'm kind of addicted, actually. What I do know is that it has a lot of charm, and from a lifelong World of Warcraft player, it gets my seal of approval. And it came at a good time because I recently broke up with my girlfriend, so I see no better option than to spend my time being a depressed middle-aged man.
And you can also buy a girlfriend in RuneScape for 10,000 GP as well.
And goblins and the recreation of a 20-year-old video game.
Okay, that was a pretty good video. A lot of the pacing in the beginning of the video seemed to be very early game. Like I was kind of worried that he only played maybe 2-3 hours and then stopped. But then he kind of reached a point where he started to figure things out. He figured out what strength did. And he started to quest a bunch, which is always a really good option. I think a lot of what can be improved is definitely working on the adventure path a little bit more and helping players get through maybe the first quest. Like maybe some of the early quests should have some sort of quest helper aspects to them to make it a little bit easier, or at least tell players how to get to the quest log.